Juan. Buenos días a todos. I am Isabel Sainmalo, moderating this session. This event has simultaneous translation, English-Spanish. If you wish to activate this function, please click on the interpretation button found in the bottom of your Zoom screen and select the language of your choice. Nuevamente, bienvenidos a todos. Este evento cuenta con traducción simultánea.
Welcome to this event. The event has simultaneous translation. You can press on the button below to choose the language of your choice. This event is about the strengthening effective governance. We are launching this document with about 80 participants who are with us today. And we are going to launch a document regarding this format of the development in Latin America. A cordial welcome to all the participants, to Vice President Lagos, the local director of the Caribbean, and all of the ministers and of the 3 countries in the region, distinguished participants. In September, we were accompanied by the advisory that we would be offering today. These are the agencies in the United Nations, and we have invited the entire public who are accompanying us now. Within the context, before we start in the formal context, this is the UNPD. This goes farther than, we have to understand that this is a crisis in governance. We must go in depth into which the challenges are. This series of advisories in governance in 2020, we had distinguished leaders together to understand this advisory, to be attentive to the important advisories of this region. We have to understand the magnitude of the governance. This is a crisis that has never happened before. And we need innovative interventions. And we need to approach them differently. We are going to start off with words of Luis Felipe, who is the director of the UNDP in Latin America, for the recuperation of the governance, the sustainable governance. Cordial salute to everybody here. I have seen that the number has grown of those who are listening today. And esteemed President Ricardo Lagos, and in all of the sessions, the consulting sessions, the Deputy Gabriel Boric from Chile, and of course, and from Sao Paulo. Particularly to you, Isabel, who are here today, talking about sustainable government in the region. Thank you so much. This is the close of a first cycle. That's what we're presenting today. But we're going to start a new cycle in our initiatives. We have to take a new look at the situation of governance in the Caribbean and Latin America. And we have to rethink the areas of governance that Isabel has presented to us today. in these very distinguished listeners today. Thank you for the participation from the different sectors, from all the different countries involved in the sector. In the context of this forum, we are trying to give the importance to the discussion of recuperation. I'm going to speak for 8 or 10 minutes to summarize how we are living this situation currently that we call effective governance. We have the medium countries which have made the crisis of COVID a tremendous shock. We have the countries of high rentability and middle rentability and low rentability. The high rentability, our region has 7 of the countries with the highest impact of COVID. In this case, Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have about 30% of the deaths, which is about 9% above the rest of the world population. If we see the dynamic evolution, it grew very quickly in the sum of the deaths accumulated, way above the wave of deaths in Europe and the rest of the world. So we're calling on institutions, the pre-existing institutions, low confidence in institutions, a great political polarization, the weakened political parties, mediocre economic response, very high inequality, weakened fiscal power, and fragmentation of the social scenario. The social media plays a very big role in the recuperation of the UNDP. In the headquarters of in the base of our discussion, one is the myth of the lack of knowledge. You would think that we would have easy access to all the information, but the idea of the popularity, we want to contradict this. The participation in the networks and the social media networks cannot substitute the basic work of reconstruction and participation, social participation. We are in a world of political distortion. About 59% of the news in Twitter is trustworthy, and we have to help this to improve. So we are approaching an opportunity. We must say yes, but not in a spontaneous way. We have to say yes. We have to unite the different actors to fight this crisis. The crisis, it has had impact on the commercial actions, and it's been systematic. In this area, where the actors sit down and come to an agreement about the actions they're going to take on the public situation regarding disequality the power of influence. We have to come to centralize the riches, to reach out to the different factors and elements. And this is why we are discussing different rules that will be necessary to put in practice. The power through the institutions, and this requires agreements. The cycle of the public power and the symmetry of the public influence. And our minds must be changed on this regard. In the first, the policies. Through public policies, we must change the response to these issues. And the third is, how do we include new actors, new coalitions, but make these actions sustainable? We're going to talk about effective governance. The idea is to support the society and create governance. Governance means action and results. So we have these principles, fiscal policies that permit sustainable expenses. The citizenship is as an active part in the construction of agreements. Transparency and response of the public management, elimination of violence as a mechanism to negotiate between the actors, social and political actors. The law and access to justice should be the same for each citizen. The transformation of the capacities of the states and innovation. And this sounds like a very long and tedious in the field of public policy. We must be able to establish social protection as a mechanism, universal and inclusive and friendly growth that's fiscally sustainable. We need to establish rules, establish instruments for response, justice and resolution of conflict as a public service that must be result in universal access and quality, and concrete aspects, institutional capacity, police, policies. In the field of actors and representation in the arena of decisions, and how to create mechanisms to capture mechanisms that of united participation that strengthen the democracies. As Isabel mentioned at the beginning, these tables brought us into the area of governance. We need to bring these to establish where we are capable currently and how far we are willing to invest, and establish where we need strategic associations. Our priority is to review the recuperation of the educational system. If we come out of this pandemic without having established parameters, clear parameters, and strengthening the effective governance, we will have missed an enormous opportunity. If this is what the UNDP is proposing, then we should using it as an instrument. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Luis Felipe, for this extraordinary representation. This included many people of very high profile, and we're very thankful for the tremendous efforts. This is born from the advisory and concern to be able to review all of this in depth. Thank you for what the regional director has offered to us, to all of these distinguished leaders in the region who have been involved. Now, starting with the president, Ricardo Lagos from Chile. Thank you very much. Effectively, as you say, the representation of the director has been very outstanding. 9% of the population,
with 9% of the population, and I think this is a challenge that really covers most of what we're discussing. And it really describes so much because the data is sometimes masked. I would like to give the example of my country. We have about 954,000 people. However, in inactive population, or those who don't have the incentive, those who are in condition of working but who don't go and actively search for work, then they're not considered within that group. 1,334,000 Chileans who appear to be inactive. They could work, but they don't go out and actively seek employment. So we have 950,000 who aren't employed, but those who don't actively go out are 1,340,000. And then those who are absent from work, who have a contract but are absent, those who are not going to be working but who will continue having a contract, and the government will provide subsidies for them. And these are 740,000 additional people. So in total, we have 3,020,000 Chileans under one of these categories, and hence we should add the 2,340,000 who are informal workers, those who are in informal labor, who are informal as a consequence. We have more than 5 million of Chileans who are in a precarious position, be that because they don't actively search for jobs, because their contract has ended, or they're in informal labor and their income has been reduced due to the pandemic. So that's about 10 million people in Chile who are employed, and so the pandemic is really affecting nearly half of people who are used to working. This is a huge challenge. How will we then be able to target these issues? Half of Chile's actively able population is being affected. Chile has had a good conduct or behavior in the past, and now it is the time to use our capability of credit in Chile and go into the economy of a debt, because this is requiring current action, timely action. Hence, these important numbers really require activation. What does this mean per se? How are we able to invest publicly, which is key for reactivating the economy, but this public reactivation and investment, actions that don't currently work or are not in effect yet. How can we do this? How do we put it through the strainer? How do we trace it? How do we look at the different investments to help us achieve some of these 17 SDGs that the UN established for 2030? In other words, the investment based on public policies should also satisfy one of these other objectives. And under this criteria, we'll be certain that we're not only affecting the short term, but the long term. Truly important and significant, because then we'll be in the condition of exiting the situation and actively reactivate. And as our regional director mentioned, this is a truly important factor. Those countries that have had increase in income, who are now requiring new demands, which is natural. As you make progress, of course, then you grow in the scale of demands. And demands, of course, force higher income from fiscal means. You can't, like in Chile, have a country that during 30 years multiplied 4 times income per inhabitant, but kept participation of fiscal activity at 20% of Chile's GDP. So there is the key factor of our problems. This is the origin of social inclusion that we had on the 18th of October 2019. Hence, we also have a problem regarding the capability of indebtedness, and we would have to have a review of fiscal policies, both in regards to how we're capable of having progressive taxes. The Ministry of Treasury has mentioned that reform needs to be produced with at least 5 points of taxes. Let's be clear, in Latin America, we don't have practical differences of pre and post increase of taxes. We're light years away from European countries, pre and post taxation, where GDP increases several points, or the tax based on GDP increases several points. We need to reestablish our seriousness and activities in taxation and fiscal matters. Another very important factor is that we need to be capable of investment together with the idea of strengthening the SDGs. We need to also have citizen participation. We need to explain. It's part of transparency. And that means we need to share trust. And trust is certainly a key factor here. How citizens believe once again in their government. Social media and social networks are a key factor for us to be able to explain and be transparent and show our actions. I would like to provide 2 observations. First, we're entering a new paradigm, a paradigm of income per capita, which is replaced by the paradigm of how much greenhouse gas is emitted per person. And that will give us more credibility according to how much we're making progress on our carbon footprint. And this new paradigm is another topic that I would like to discuss. how do we approach not only climate change, but intergenerational justice? What does this mean? As a result of the Industrial Revolution, during the 20th century, we became predators of this planet such as we had never done before. Now we are aware that we cannot continue being predators, and the concept of intergenerational justice means that goods, services, what we have created at the expense of the planet, well, my generation needs to be concerned what we're leaving behind to our children, our grandchildren. Intergenerational justice means that what I receive in my lifetime is something that I use, but I am concerned about giving back so that my children and grandchildren can have the same access using what is in our planet and on our planet for their children and their grandchildren. I think that's the greatest challenge we're facing, reactivating through these requirements which are truly essential. Hence, UNDP's report is an important document that we should all follow. Congratulations for this. President, thank you so much. Sorry, Isabel, I'm gonna talk again, but I would like to thank you so much for your intervention. And we're just so happy. It's such a privilege to have Alicia Bárcena with us today. Thank you, Alicia. And it's wonderful to hear from you and your vision, your discussion. You were a key partner in these initiatives, in this discussion. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And warm greetings to Alicia. I think her support is so important for us to focus on Latin America. Thank you, President. Yes, thank you, Luis Felipe. So with this welcome and this really deep message, and what we're seeing here, more than the 250 people who are with us today. We have the director of CEPAL, and we're really accompanied by great experts. So we've mentioned that those of us who are in public office have absolute respect, because today we have people in the decision-making process and these scenarios that are quite complex that we couldn't have imagined or envisioned previously. And as the regional director mentioned, this exercise aims to establish recovery and contributions for this recovery. So we welcome Vice President from Costa Rica. What a valuable exercise. And thank you, Vice President, for having been with us in other meetings and now here with us. We want to greet Luis Felipe, the director of CEPAL, Alicia, and Isabel for coordinating this whole meeting. First, we would like to congratulate you, because really debating all of this while undergoing a crisis and pandemic is such a challenge. This is a live challenge, really, based on a very complex reality as far as development goes. I would like to focus on what you've mentioned in the document, and I think this document is quite comprehensive. It's already discussed the main things, such as the social pacts, these new social pacts. What we're saying is, due to what we've been able to establish during the crisis, is insufficient for reactivation and for governance that would be truly quality and equal. And we have an important factor for consideration while we manage the crisis. I'm very happy that Costa Rica has made important decisions previously that will enable part of the population to have access to vaccination, so that the public systems in Costa Rica will have reached certain goals despite the huge challenges that we've faced. The truth is that strong institutions, well-funded institutions, can face crises such as this one. The social security basket in Costa Rica has been an amazing example as far as its capacity to generate quality responses to the pandemic. Going back to the fundamental issues here that have to do with a reality which is truly challenging, the reality we're facing now, and it requires institutions that are well aligned to the new reality and not to what we saw previously, what we dealt with previously. Our older institutions in our region were usually insufficient. They always left certain people behind. And these gaps made evident the work that we saw prior to the crisis and the impact that we see now, two very different things. So I would like to focus on three factors very quickly. First is productivity. Yes, productivity, but biointelligent productivity, a different kind of productivity where it is based on, and as I would like to reiterate what President Lagos said, we cannot talk about current productivity as such. We have to base our productivity with nature, considering nature, and not leave the lagging consequences for future generations. It would be unacceptable to do so, especially at times where we have all the tech available, where we can focus on different kinds of productivity. Hence, biointelligence is very important, because look at all the AI access we have. Look at all the knowledge we have. It must be employed properly in health and productivity. So we need to be responsible from every perspective in order to guarantee everyone's rights. In other words, there is no productivity and new responses that would violate others, discriminate others, stomp on others. The debate that we're having is, what is the productivity that we want to have? I call it biointelligent, but focused and responsible with people's lives and our population. The second point, which I would like to highlight, which has been discussed in the document, is in regards to inclusion. Obviously, these are topics regarding inclusion that would reduce the gaps and that would acknowledge institutions and groups that have been left behind historically. We cannot avoid discussing inclusion, because inclusion itself is insufficient from every perspective. Inclusion needs to also involve the knowledge that the efforts we make, our efforts, based on the fact that the pandemic unmasked vulnerable sectors. And these sectors are those that are paying the price with their own lives, because they don't have all the accesses, they don't have all the tools, they don't have all the possibilities to support the market or receive the support that they need, or women supporting themselves, their own homes, heads of households, trying to do what they can, support as they can, because evidently, and I'm seeing this from our own experience, states have had to prioritize funding and resources and benefits, and these resources are not unlimited. So those who have been most affected by the pandemic need to get urgent care. But the reality is families, women, and people are those who have to reinvent their lives and their income. And that has to do with resilience. We have to discuss topics such as resilience and how, going towards what. I would like to focus on the topic of efficient governance. Efficient governance must, and it was established as such, must understand that this is a governance that will need a new distribution of power in every space. And this cannot be an efficient governance without the involvement of women as number one. Effectively, we need to reestablish, as the document mentioned, the topic that this is a new social pact. It's insufficient to base ourselves on what we saw previously, and in these new conditions, we have to take step by step. This requires a new reality, new institutionalism. Some countries are moving towards new constituents, such as Chile, and we hope that the context will provide new constituents without the need for a violence or anger. And we need to highlight our youth. This new social pact needs to go through or undergo this very difficult phase generationally. This generation needs to have a role. They need to be able to interpret their reality better. Many people who were in different positions of power were seeing their realities with the lenses of the past. So citizen participation.
Para plantear los 8 ejes tienen que ver con esa capacidad de generar alianzas no solamente entre lo público y lo privado, alianzas con sectores sociales que están teniendo capacidad de...
And we need to create partnerships and alliances. In Costa Rica, for instance, we've established efforts in order to make the fundamental efforts to repair the issues that we saw previously.
Anteriores que obligan a buscar los pesos y los contrapesos en ese acuerdo.
Pero that would focus on the burden and the counter burden, and we have to create a direct dialogue with citizens. We don't have another reality. We can't decide or depend on votes being enough, and I think this has been discussed.
So that people can hear the preconditions to the governments. I'm going to end up proposing, there are so many subjects related that are in our agendas. The challenges to incorporate economic goals intelligently with a different focus in the different sectors. I'm talking about the Afro-descendants, the indigenous, of a much more inclusive focus. We have to center our pact on well-being, and we're talking about all the consequences that this pandemic has had on mental health, women especially, and our answers have to be yes and yes. The concept of the labor issue. We have had 2 trimesters, but these are unemployment levels that are historic. This unemployment is affecting women in such an incredible way. We have to have a special digital government that's open, where people feel that they can find out the channels of participation. And the people need to have much more clarity in where the solutions, where they can find the solutions. We have decided on approaching the social condition in a different way. And we have less margin in where the social decisions are being made. And entering into this new policy for Peru, working from our political experience with much more in all-embracing policies. We're taking this as a challenge for the fiscal pacts to decrease the breaches and the rifts in the competence of residency. We have to follow our nature, our intelligence, and that will place women at the center of our attention. And we have to learn from this moment that we're going through. And where Peru has a fundamental role in all of this. Thank you very much, Vice President. What a message to close up with. This is the subject about how to approach the pandemic. This is the subject that has followed through all of our speeches. So now we're going to have 3 panelists who are going to have 5 minutes, who were part of our advisory last year. The professor of Emilia from Sao Paulo. Good afternoon to everybody here. To everybody. This is an honor to be here, and it's a great pride to have this opportunity to participate in this group that is inclusive in this document. In our government, in documents, in democracy is a great challenge. The lack of equality, and we have threatening phenomena. First of all, the distrust, the citizens' distrust in the governors, that is weakening the legitimacy of the situation. And the second is the possibility to capture the interests of important actors like the great, the large industries and in enterprises. And then there's the possibility of corruption and the misuse of public resources. And we have to confront these threats. And we have to present this in a very innovative way. But I would like to underline 2 of these. It's very important to keep the system open from social pressure. There is a collapse in the society. We have to maintain the pressure in the different levels of society open. We have to open up to new actors and new agendas, and gender equality, and overcome the discrimination and the environmental issues. And then there are different mechanisms for participation. The political system, the citizens' sensation, to make them feel part of the public community. And also, I think it's very necessary to develop social mechanisms to monitor and control of the agenda of the governments and their agencies. We have so much more experience in participative methods, in the sense of monitoring and managing public management. In the entire document, I believe that it's a very valuable offer to be able to confront these problems and create a sort of a realistic utopia, and a utopia that we can actually create that will permit our societies can be more just, stronger, so that we can confront the next disasters that may come to us. And I have no doubt about it. This is a very valuable document, and it's very important that those who are capable of transforming this into actual practice, that we do it. Thank you so much. And every time that I can share with you, it's very interesting for me. Thank you, Maria Herminia. And you have said something very outstanding, that it is, you said something very outstanding, that it is possible. Speaking of the reality of the same as our President Lagos, there is a road and a manner to approach. So we're going to follow now with Gabriel from Chile.
Muy buenas tardes acá desde.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes.
Bueno,
yes.
En primer lugar, les agradezco muchísimo.
First of all, I thank you for this space for dialogue. To be able to share with personalities from so many different countries, looking beyond our borders and our different nations, and to be able to express the identity of all of our nations. Especially Peru, that we are cooperating with them especially. What the document mentions, first of all, there needs to be a fiscal pact in Latin America. It talks about I was surprised.
Quien nos contaba cómo en ese momento, cuando empezamos la discusión, Europa estaba tomando la decisión
Europe was taking a decision to make a fiscal pact and agreed on 90 million euros. And immediately when you see the reality of the European nations, they're doing it from the logic of integration. We have Mercosur, the Andean Pact, but it seems that above all of that, we don't have an integrated fiscal policy. And we need it to confront the challenges of our region. In Europe agrees on the fiscal pact. We're talking about here in Latin America the actions of the president of the BIP. We're breaking a strong consensus. Instead of looking forward in Latin America, we're competing instead of cooperating to get the vaccine for the coronavirus. We should be working together to get more vaccines as fast as we can. If we were united, we could cover a greater and wider sector. This is the first point. The second one, it's fundamental, basic, that we should have the opportunity that from starting with this crisis, we have a sustainable development. Before this, we were talking in a very intense way, and the tremendous challenges, the ecological disaster that we're facing. It seemed, at least in Chile, this shouldn't be the issue, but it is of a major importance. We have to return to having a sense of urgency and recuperation. It's fundamental. What happened in the middle of last year in the center of the Amazons? The representative in Chile represents the Antarctic. There are challenges that we are not confronting. The ecological disaster should be a priority. It's fundamental. It's not enough that each country just tries to solve his problems. When we're talking about the Amazon, that's one of the lungs of the world. This is one of the clearest examples, along with the Antarctic. What I want to finish saying is the document the greatest challenge that we have today are those that are not willing to speak, and which is a reflection of those who are not willing to tolerate their own reflection. What we saw a few days ago with the capital in the capital situation with Trump, it's more and more difficult to speak between us. And this is one of the greatest challenges that we have in a process of recuperation, is that those who are not willing to speak would speak up. This is a great work that you're doing and a wonderful opportunity. Humbly from here in Chile, I would like to speak to you farther down the line about the process. It's a large history that we have here in Chile, and thank you so much. And we will be very waiting to speak with you further on.
Lo demás es una fiesta entre amigos. Bueno, quizás la política es un poco eso también y definitivamente fundamental. La próxima intervención.
The next intervention that we're going to have by Marla Gutana, she is the chief economist, will be in English, and we have simultaneous translation, and you can have access to the translation by selecting the interpretation button at the bottom of your screens.
We also held a very relevant discussion with Caribbean participants where all of these issues were discussed at length. We had your participation there. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and thank you so much to the UNDP for having me in that consultation as well as in today's forum. I really appreciate the opportunity to represent the Caribbean and share my ideas. Thank you for the document and the report that was compiled. I will try to speak a little bit slowly, although I have 3 minutes, and I'm standing between you and your lunch. So I will just try not to give the interpreters too much of a hard time. I just wanted to just highlight 2 or 3 of the points that I think are the most important with respect to governance. And yes, I agree that this crisis is one of weak institutions and governance that created the pandemic. The first point I want to raise is that in this region, in the Caribbean, we need to cooperate and we need greater coordination amongst the countries in this region. I think that we all have similar struggles. We have important differences, but as Gabriel had mentioned earlier in his intervention a few minutes ago, even if we had cooperated and coordinated with respect to procuring the vaccine for this virus, we would have had much better results and a much greater success in securing this vaccine for the populations of the Caribbean. But even something as simple as that, we find it difficult to cooperate and coordinate. The second point I wanted to raise with respect to governance in the Caribbean region, fiscal policy is in fact the most important and most significant policy tool in this region with respect to effecting social and socioeconomic outcomes. So governance, I think, has to be focused first and foremost on fiscal policy, making sure that fiscal policy is relevant, making sure that it is well executed, making sure that there's transparency and accountability. You might have seen that in Jamaica, for example, they're creating a fiscal council or fiscal commission that it's going to be charged with the responsibility of holding the government accountable for the fiscal budget that they would basically present to the population on an annual or periodic basis. And this is a very important new institution being created in Jamaica that I think will go a long way in driving transparency and accountability with respect to fiscal policy and how fiscal policy is enacted and executed in this region. And the final point I want to make very quickly is that the empirical evidence shows us that the more women we have in leadership and in decision-making positions, the better our governance outcomes are, and the better our socioeconomic outcomes are. If you look at in the Nordic countries, for example, Germany, for example, just recently passed legislation around having greater representation of women on boards, even in the private sector. The reason for this is because the evidence is there and the evidence is clear. And I think that in this region, we've not done, apart from Cuba, in the Caribbean, we've not done a very good job of ensuring a high level of women represented in lawmakers and also in the private sector. And it's something we certainly need to do a much better job on. So based on the fact that my time has run out, I will stop there. Again, I thank you for including me in this very important forum, and I wish you all the best of luck in executing all of these very good policy suggestions and initiatives that we've agreed on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marla, for that fantastic conclusion and incorporation of the Caribbean voice, which is so important. We're going to make a small change in our agenda for a very, very important comment and reflection, celebrating again, like the, como dijo, perdón, me quedé en inglés. Como
Sorry,
dijo,
I kept speaking in English. As the regional director mentioned, we have Alicia Bárcena with us here today. She's the executive secretary of CEPAL. Welcome, Alicia, and we would like to hear your comments regarding this important discussion. Thank you, Isabel, and thank you for the opportunity. I was very interested in being participant of this important panel. I would like to congratulate Luis Felipe and UNDP for focusing on governance as a center piece for the work being carried out in the region, and CEPAL, your availability, your disposal to collaborate in this wonderful exercise. I think UNDP has a mandate and all of the conditions to make progress. I think that the background of the pandemic And the main issue at hand is a culture of privilege and inequality. I think the anger in the region shows a breaking point of this development model. I think sometimes we provoke it. We're audacious. We think it's a development model that's focused on the wealth that's deteriorating our environment, and institutions that behave and reproduce these behaviors based on those who have more. And the culture of privilege is prevalent and it's inherent to our colonialism and colonial culture. And it struggles against the fruits of progress and productivity. I think the culture of privilege needs to be the focal point because it naturalizes inequality, discrimination, and we believe it's so important to target this issue. The pandemic has unmasked certain reflections. In 2021, we're going to face uncertainty. We're going to assume that the crisis will last much longer than expected. Hence, public policies need to be at the center, the heart. And we're going to have monetary and fiscal policies that are expansive and longer than we believe would be necessary. And as we mentioned, regarding the distribution of vaccination, well, it can't be that just these wealthy countries collecting all this vaccine, procuring all this vaccine. In UK, there's 6 doses per inhabitant. How can this be? Our region needs to respond to this challenge in a definitive way. I believe that the inequality for us, Sabal, inequality is the main problem of our region. It's not just about income. As Luis Felipe mentioned, it has to do with wealth. And there's an international inequality, a global synergy that needs to be tackled, Mr. President, because you have mentioned, look, 8.3% of carbon emissions are produced by our area, but we're like 80 times more likely to suffer the impacts of climate change, such as the hurricanes. So we need to focus on the unhappiness, the social unhappiness and anger. These new pacts need to be based on a new proposal for development. We have, under the leadership of Costa Rica, established changes. Costa Rica presides CEPAL, and we established a document called Let's Create a New Future with Sustainability, where we discuss industrial policies. We propose 7 sectors: tech and industrial and environmental policies. Costa Rica, who has truly been important here, we need to recover the Escazú agreement. This is an agreement that invites to the participation of our citizens, environmental justice, access to information, environmental access as well, and it's essential. These are tools that citizens should have access to, established by the leadership of Chile, which of course, well, Chile got a little frightened with it because corporations and their lobby wasn't helping. Hope, it needs to be audacious. We need to be audacious because today's world demands acknowledgement, and it needs to be reciprocal to close these gaps, to target these gaps. And it demands from us that the workforce would become more equal. And without trace of doubt, we need to continue working in joint fashion with the systems. And I thank Luis Felipe for helping us work together to achieve the whole system availability from the United Nations to Latin America and the Caribbean to discuss these topics. And I believe the region needs to establish a united front, a solidary front, to tell the international community that these asymmetries are not sustainable, that we need a special emissions approvals and conditional funds for mid and low income countries. We need to lower the debt of the Caribbean, and we need multilateral effects based and starting from the pandemic to create more equality nationally, regionally. And I believe, dear friends and colleagues, and with this I will conclude, I believe that the opportunity is here with the Chilean constitution. I'm privileged to be in Chile right now at this historical moment for the country, because they're going to show us the roadmap of how we can rewrite a new social pact with gender equality, with this debate that we're consistently under. It's wonderful, certainly wonderful. Congratulations. This is a constitution that arose from society, not from a government, not from others. It began the 18th of October 2019. Thank you, Alicia Bárcena, for your extraordinary reflection and closing remarks. We thank you so much, the Regional Director, Luis Felipe López,
no solo por haber puesto todo el
not only really put the whole organization at our disposal, but establishing this platform for dialogue. With this, we are closing our session, and now to close with a few minutes. It's impossible to mention all of the participants here, but we have a public document, a public list published on the UNDP's webpage, and it's also established here. There's a link here in the chat. Please share it, and please let us continue this conversation. As we've mentioned clearly, we need to produce dialogue, and that's what we're trying to do with this dialogue. So thank you, Vice President, President, and the other panelists who have followed us online. Thank you, Regional Director. Thank you all. And goodbye. Thank you, everyone, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.